lots to discuss with them, lots to discuss about what's going on, not least as things are happening live. So to tell us a bit more about what exactly is going on, can I introduce Councillor Martin Tett, who is going to set the scene for us now and introduce today's conference. So, Martin, the floor is yours. Martin Tett, round of applause.
Thanks very much, Anthony. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My own personal welcome to everybody here to the wonderful Silverstone, very much set in the heartland of our corridor between Swindon and Cambridge, that actually is going to be one of the biggest, most dynamic parts of the UK economy going forward. So welcome here. From my point of view, what I want to do is, first of all, extend my own welcome to you all. And also, I'm going to spend a little bit of time setting the scene in terms of some of the background to this. And also, I think, looking ahead, particularly at the budget and potentially the spending review next year, set out what we think as leaders of local authorities should be the compact between ourselves, yourselves and government in helping to actually realise the dream we have for the corridor. So that's my agenda for my next 10 minutes or so. Hopefully that works for you. Can I just take I didn't see what happened. How many people were here last year? It's quite a lot of you, but there's quite a lot of new people as well, which is great. And I think that demonstrates in many ways the way in which the momentum of the whole corridor is building. And I think you can demonstrate that, and you actually see the achievements we've had over the last 12 months. So what I'm going to do to start with is say a little bit about the background to where we are now and how this developed. I have to think back only about 4 years, a conversation between myself and the leader of Oxfordshire County Council, Ian Hudspeth, the leader of Northamptonshire County Council at that time, that looked at the corridor and said, this is something that has enormous potential that's not realised. This is way before the National Infrastructure Commission. It was just a twinkle in Gordon Brown, twinkle in the eyes of George Osborne at the time. That was a Freudian slip. And we saw the potential there. We were very quickly joined by our partners from the Bedfordshire Unitaries and Milton Keynes, and then Cambridgeshire County Council. And since then, we've seen that alliance expand. We now have Swindon Borough, who see themselves very much as the western anchor of the heartland. We've been joined by Hertfordshire County Council, who see themselves, particularly in the north, as an integral part of the whole heartlands. Very close, obviously, to Luton, which is a key link in our industrial strategy there. And over in the eastern side, Cambridgeshire County Council, but we've also been joined by Mayor James Palmer, who brings, again, a completely new approach to this, a new energy and excitement to the way, given his responsibilities on the strategic infrastructure side across Cambridgeshire. So that's grown very substantially in geography since we were here last year. And in terms of depth, another major change that's just taking place, and on Friday we'll have the first meeting of the alliance leaders that would include representatives from our key partners in our district councils. And obviously what they bring to the party particularly is that local spatial awareness and the development of the local plans that will bring the housing that will be a key enabler for the economic growth that we want to see across here. So we've invited the key district partners now to sit around the table with us and become part of that overall partnership, which we hope will deliver the sort of prosperity which we believe this corridor can bring. So some significant progress there in terms of that partnership. Now, I've talked about local authorities so far, but actually local authorities are only one part of this. Another key part is business. And one of the things that government is really keen on is that it's the local enterprise partnerships, those bodies that bring local government and key business partners together that drive the overall economic strategy for the Oxford to Cambridge arc. And that means sitting on our Heartlands board, we have all of the local enterprise partnerships that represent that geography. And each of them individually, since we last met, have taken on the task of looking at the local industrial strategies that government has tasked them with developing. And they will be looking at not only at their local industrial strategies, but as part of our alliance, one of the key responsibilities they have is to look at how those local industrial strategies join together. So what we need to make sure is that we don't have strategies that compete against each other unnecessarily. Clearly there'll be competition in some elements, but where we have competition, we can also have collaboration. We can look at the synergies. For example, the obvious example here is on the Motorsport Valley area. Where can we get those synergies across that heartland area? We have the creative industries, both down in Buckinghamshire at Pinewood, but we have strong creative industries in Hertfordshire too. So looking at where those key synergies exist and where we can actually strengthen that alliance by looking at not just the local industrial strategies, but how they seamlessly join together to produce a relatively light touch, but a coherent economic strategy across that heartlands area. And that's something very important to us. And lastly, linking in from the industrial strategy, one of the other key components is skills. And again, making sure that we have the right skills providers across that heartlands area. Now, I'm told there are a couple of relatively small and unknown colleges at each end of this corridor. I'm not quite sure what they are. I think it's one in Oxford and one in Cambridge. But in between, there are also some really strong skills providers. We're very close, for example, here to the fantastic University of Buckingham, with Anthony Selzman, who's the Vice-Chancellor there. Really, really strong, innovative individual. We have Cranfield. We have the new college in Milton Keynes. There are terrific universities across Hertfordshire and Bedfordshire. We need to make sure those skill providers are aligned with what we're doing here to make sure that we can deliver the trained individuals who are actually going to enable this area to grow and prosper as well. So all those alignments need to come together, and that's one of the roles I think we, as a Heartlands Leaders team, working in partnership with our colleagues in districts and working in partnership with business, really want to see happen as we move forward on this. So that's very much where we've set our stall out. In terms of how we need to move forward, one of the things when you talk to business, and it's one of the main reasons we exist, is they say, well, we'd love to see jobs grow here. We'd love to see more prosperity in the area, but the infrastructure, quite frankly, is terrible. And this is an area that's still predominantly rural. So when you look around the infrastructure of the whole corridor, you see congested roads, you see tiny country lanes, you see too many potholes, candidly. We need to make sure that the infrastructure is here that enables business to invest with real confidence into this area. And it's not just short-term fixing of individual potholes, dare I say. It's long-term strategic investment in the infrastructure that's really needed right across the heartland. So, for example, roads. And it was hinted earlier, and I'm sort of vaguely looking down towards my colleagues in Highways England down here. Today, the Minister is going to announce, a major commitment, we know, on the expressway. And I'm not going to say much more than that because I'll probably be kneecapped if I come off here and I've said too much. But virtually any minute now, the Minister, Jessie Norman, will be standing up and actually making a very major announcement on the expressway, and in particular with regard to which particular corridor government has chosen on that. And we welcome the commitment to that expressway. But it's not just the expressway. The key thing I really want government to realise is every journey begins and ends on a local road. And if you want connectivity, it's not about an end-to-end Oxford to Cambridge, Swindon to Cambridge type experience. It's how you get onto that road. It's how you get from there also to the other key motorways. How do you get from that expressway down to the M40? How do you get from that expressway down to the M4? How do you get up to Birmingham? Importantly, how will the businesses that grow up along that corridor get down to Heathrow Airport or to Luton Airport, which are major international hubs for that growth and that connectivity internationally, which we're going to need so desperately post-Brexit. We need to make sure we look at the complete picture on that and not just take little siloed approaches to roads, with great respect to colleagues from Highways England. The other thing is it's not just about roads, it's about utilities as well. And over the last 12 months, we've done a lot of work as a Heartlands board, looking at the big constraints that utilities are on the growth of this corridor. Whether it's power, electricity, all the main utilities like water and so on have to be in place to enable that growth. And at the moment, there's too much of a constraint, quite often in legislation, to enable those utilities to invest up front in anticipation of growth, rather than actually, at the moment, a rather slow response to growth. And that's a big inhibitor that we really need to overcome, and we've done a lot of work on that, and you'll hear more about that today as well. It's also about rail, and we welcome the commitment, obviously, on East West Rail. We need to see that moving forward, quite frankly, a lot faster. But also, it's about communications. And I say every time I give one of these speeches, we must not forget that in 2018, looking forward potentially to 2050, This is going to be a different world. This is going to be a world where the internet and connectivity probably almost have a supreme role above traditional road communications. If you don't have absolutely first-class communications, you are really almost a third world country. And we need to make sure that we're not investing in really slow-speed broadband, but we're investing in the sort of broadband that enables the leading high-tech companies globally to come to this area and know they're going to have terabytes worth of connectivity and not sort of small megabits worth of connectivity. And there's still far too many areas across the heartland where it's difficult to even make and receive telephone calls, let alone have that sort of connectivity that we're really going to need. So I think there's a big challenge there for all of us and how we move forward on that. So we have a region with enormous potential. We've made our case, and what's great is that the National Infrastructure Commission and the government have recognised that. They've put in place significant support to that. I think that that's good, but quite frankly, and I'm going to say this openly, still more needs to be done by government, and I'm going to come back to that in a second, because that commitment's welcome, but at the moment it's still too disparate, it's too split up between different government departments, it's still too incoherent in terms of timescales. Still dribbles of money and revenue, some in capital, some in short-term capital, some in long-term capital. We really need to see that come together better than it has so far. So we can build on that opportunity. Now, when I say we need support from government, and this is part of my challenge, I think, opening this conference, most of us who are strategic council leaders recognise that government just doesn't have an infinite pot of money. Each of us individually struggles probably every day, every week, certainly every year when we're setting our budgets, and most of us are entering into new budget cycles at the moment. There are almost unlimited demands on how we can spend money, and very limited amounts of money to spend. So I completely get the government perspective. But if they really want this corridor to grow and become the powerhouse for the UK economy, which we need post-Brexit, we really do need government to come together and recognise that this has to be a priority area for investment that will actually generate the returns to the UK economy, which will power not just this area, but actually the whole country and enable them to invest in other parts of the UK as well. We need that priority, we need that investment. So one of the things we want to do is set out to government a challenge, and what we call today a grand bargain. And that is, if you share that view, if you share that ambition that we have collectively as leaders across counties, unitaries and districts to make this a really, really successful area, commit with us as we get now to the budget and to next year's next year's spending review. We want to see some real commitment from you from this. First of all, a challenge to government, and there are representatives of government in this audience. Let's work together to produce a national policy statement for strategic infrastructure. I'm not talking about detailed plans for housing development, that's the purview of our colleagues in the districts, but for that big strategic infrastructure that enables successful growth. Let's have a national policy statement that we work on together that actually sets out what are the key roads, the rail connections, but also the links into them. What are the key utility developments we need? What about the big communications infrastructure we need? Let's see that so that we've actually got that joint commitment between local government, business and central government. Let's also establish a major schemes development fund, because one of the problems we have as local authorities is too often government come out with quite short-term announcements and say, we want oven-ready schemes. Where's your business case? Yeah, lots of nodding heads in the audience. This is absolutely the world we live in. And we don't have those schemes because it takes a lot of time and a lot of money to develop those schemes. You can't just do that in a world where resources are very short in local government. So we need to see a commitment from government to have a major schemes development fund, which means we can invest upfront to develop the big strategic schemes and the links to them that will enable us to respond really quickly when government says, give us your schemes. Let's get that investment done up front. Thirdly, let's have an indicative funding envelope, because too often government is too, and I know this is a well-kept secret within government, there are lots of little silos within government, right? And departments that don't talk to each other. It's all come as a big surprise to most of you, I know. But one of the things that the LGA has done, the Local Government Association, we've counted over 20 different funding schemes coming into local government in some way associated with growth. What we need to do is to actually see much more of that consolidated together, so we know that the revenue matches the capital, that we know that the short-term money is actually something that's part of a longer-term commitment, so we can actually work with private business to actually then leverage in private investment, because we know that long-term funding is going to be there as well. So again, how about making sure that we have an indicative funding envelope that sets out that commitment into the medium and long term, so we can understand what resources will be available? Then we can work with you to help prioritise that. And that leads me on to my fourth point. Let's do much more joint working. Let's not have a government and a local government and a business sitting in isolation. You know, we need to be working together to make this happen. So we need a much better strategic dialogue. We need much clearer interfaces so that we can actually identify those future investment requirements, work together collectively within the public sector, with business, and also with yourselves as strategic partners. And if we can do that, I think we can really make some massive progress quite quickly within this corridor. And lastly, one of the things we really do need government to step up to is some of the really big priority projects that they have already, in many ways, committed to, but in some ways are already stalled. We need to make sure that things like the Black Cat Roundabout, let's make sure that's a real priority for government and get that delivered along the expressway route. Let's make sure that East West Rail really does have the focus from government to get that railway line delivered on time. There's a list of projects, and we'll talk about those later, but we really want to see government giving ministerial focus to this area and committing really strongly to those projects, because they can be the catalyst for the takeoff in economic growth that we want to see along here. So in conclusion, today is going to be a day talking about, in many ways, some of the successes, and there's been a lot of progress over the last 12 months. But there's a big road ahead of us. It's a very exciting road. It's a very challenging road. Local government, both strategic authorities and our colleagues in the district councils, business in terms of local enterprise partnerships, and many of you as strategic partners are ready to step up to the plate. And my challenge here today to government, having welcomed the commitment on the expressway, but there's more to do. We really need to see government step up with us to that plate and really help this area become the great economic powerhouse that we believe it can be, taking us forward post-Brexit into a much brighter future. That challenge is here today, and I hope government will rise to it too. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the rest of this conference. I think we're going to have a great day here. Thank you very much indeed.